Chapter 19. A Scandal in Belgravia. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move and they all went up in smoke. They all stared at each other, John looking to Sherlock, Sherlock at Jim, Jim to Amelia, and Amelia's gaze flitting between Sherlock and the criminal. Amelia twitched as Staying Alive by the Bee Gees began to play, echoing in the space. Jim closed his eyes and sighed. "Do you mind if I get that?" No, please," Sherlock insisted. "You've got the rest of your life." "Hello?" Moriarty said, answering the phone. There was a long pause. "Yes, of course it is. What do you want?" He turned to Sherlock to mouth sorry. "Oh, it's fine," Sherlock mouthed back. "Say that again," Jim screamed, spinning back around with a look of fury. He blew out a breath, and then quieter. "Say that again, and know that if you're lying to me, I will find you and I will skin you." He started to leave, only to turn back around and walk toward Sherlock, Amelia, and John. "Wait, sorry. Wrong day to die." "Oh, did you get a better offer?" Amelia said, eyebrow raised. Jim ignored her. "You'll be hearing from me, Sherlock." He held the phone to his ear once more. "So, if you have what you say you have, I will make you rich. If you don't, I'll make you into shoes." Then, just before he walked out the door, he snapped his fingers. All lasers focused on the trio disappearing. "What happened there?" John asked, sounding relieved. "Someone changed his mind," Amelia said bitterly. "The question is, who?" "What are you typing?" Amelia asked John a few weeks later, coming up behind him with a mug of tea in hand. She sipped her tea and raised an eyebrow when he didn't respond. "John? What? Oh, blog." "About?" Amelia pressed as she took a seat in her chair, groaning, when two hopped up and sat in her lap. The bulldog was now fully grown, but he hadn't lost his habit of jumping up onto chairs in order to get more attention. She scratched behind his ear absent-mindedly. "Us? You mean me," Sherlock corrected without looking up from his newspaper, although Amelia could have sworn that he smiled at her. He'd been doing a lot of that lately, Amelia had noticed. John now knew about their little relationship. However unconventional it may be, or ever since then, Sherlock had been far more open with his displays of affection. Not that Amelia was complaining. "Why?" asked John. "Well, you're typing a lot," Sherlock said, just as the doorbell rang. "Right then, so, what have we got?" Over a period of many weeks, people came and left 221B. Some wanting to consult with Sherlock, others with Amelia. They were inconsistent with their visiting hours, ranging from 12 in the evening to 12 at night. It got to the point where Amelia didn't bother changing out of her night tie, having given up changing in the middle of the night, and then again in the morning. "My wife seems to spending a very long time at the office," a client started. "Boring," Sherlock cut him off, marching the man out of the door and slamming it in his face. He rolled his eyes as Amelia shot him a glare. He was being boring. "You could have let him finish his story," Amelia said. "Jesus Christ, you two, if you're going to bicker nonstop over this, I swear to God, I'll leave here without a second glance," John threatened. "Why should I?" Sherlock insisted. "Because it's considered polite," Amelia said. John held his head in his hands as two began to bark, spurring by Amelia and Sherlock's shouting. "All of you, shut up!" The flat fell into silence. Then the doorbell rang once more. "Here we go again," sighed John. Not long after John and Sherlock solved the case, Amelia having to go to work due to something about Russian elections and a potential terrorist threat, John sat at his desk, his laptop open as he updated his blog. He sighed as Sherlock leaned over his shoulder, reading the entry. "Geek Interpreter," Sherlock said as he saw the entry's title. "What's that?" "It's the title," John said tiredly. "What does it need a title for?" Sherlock asked, huffing in frustration, as John smiled in response. Sherlock stormed back to his bedroom, shutting the door with a loud bang. "Do people actually read your blog?" Sherlock questioned as he examined the woman's body with his magnifying glass. Amelia elbowed him in the side. "Rude," she hissed. Sherlock ignored her. "Where do you think our clients come from?" John said, turning to Sherlock. "I have a website," came his answer, "in which you enumerate 240 different types of tobacco ash," Amelia pointed out. "Nobody's reading your website." Sherlock straightened and glared at her, pouting momentarily. "Right then," John said as he stepped forward to examine the body, along with Amelia and Sherlock. "Dyed blonde hair, no obvious cause of death except for these speckles, whatever they are." He pointed to the tiny red marks, letting out a deep, long breath as he realized Sherlock and Amelia were already leaving the room. "Oh, for God's sake," Amelia said around a mouthful of burnt toast, which Sherlock had made for her, and Amelia didn't have the heart to decline his offer. She glared down at her older brother as he updated his blog, using only 2 fingers to type. What? John asked, looking up at her. The speckled blonde? Seriously? Amelia shook her head and walked off. John pursed his finger hovering over the delete button, but left it as it was. There were two girls sitting in the living room. Amelia wasn't quite sure when they'd appeared, but she'd gone off for 5 minutes, and when she returned, they were there with their far too round faces and crossed ankles. They stared at her as she came into the room, and the taller and presumably older of the two readjusted the hem of her dress. The shorter squirmed in her jumper and jeans. Slowly, Amelia took a seat, unnerved by the fact that their eyes never left hers. What seems to be the problem? She asked in a soft voice. They wouldn't let us see Granddad. He was dead, said the younger ones. Is that 'cause he'd gone to heaven? People don't really go to heaven when they die, Sherlock said flippantly. They're taken to a special room and burned. Sherlock, Amelia said, hurrying over to console the children. There was a plane crash in Dulsendorf yesterday, Lestrade said a few days later. Everyone dead. Suspected terrorist bomb, Sherlock said, bored. We do watch the news. No, Amelia said, narrowing her eyes. You said boring and turned over. Well, according to the flight details, Lestrade said, looking at a bag full of evidence as Sherlock and Amelia inspected the car. This man was checked in on board. Inside his coat, he's got a stub from his boarding pass, napkins from the flight, and even one of those special biscuits. Here's his passport stamped in Berlin airport. So this man should have died in a plane crash in Germany yesterday, but instead he's in a car boot in Southwark. Lucky escape, John said. Not really, Amelia said. He's still dead. Any ideas? Lestrade asked Sherlock. 8, Sherlock said as he examined the man's hand. So far. He straightened, looking to Amelia for guidance, but she seemed too confused. Sherlock then eliminated several more of his implausible ideas. Okay, 4 ideas. He turned towards Lestrade, looking at the passport and ticket stumps. Maybe 2 ideas. A passenger jet flew above the small grove. Possibly none, Amelia muttered. Back at 221B, John was, once again, typing in his log. Amelia was reading Shakespeare, and Sherlock was conducting an experiment to occupy the time. Amelia scoffed as Sherlock, wearing protective gloves, carrying a blowtorch and a container of green liquid, walked into the living room. He came up behind John, glaring at Amelia. He scanned over John's laptop, the blog entry titled Sherlock Holmes Baffled. No, don't mention the unsolved one, Sherlock insisted. People want to know you're human, John answered. Why? 'Cause they're interested. No, they're not, Sherlock contradicted, looking at Amelia. Why are they? John remained silent, Amelia letting out a quiet scuff. Look at that, John said proudly, avoiding his friend's questions. John's eyes were on the hit counter on his blog. 1,895. Sorry, what? Sherlock said, snapping out of his daze. He hadn't realized he had been staring, but perhaps that was why Amelia was smiling to herself. After all, Hamlet wasn't exactly a comedy. I reset that counter last night, John said. This blog has nearly 2,000 hits in the last 8 hours. This is your living, Sherlock, not 240 different types of tobacco ash. 243, Sherlock sulked. Amelia let out a pealing laugh, setting her book to the side. Are you sure you two aren't the couple? Quite frankly, I could totally see you two together. Half of Tumblr agrees with me as well. Tumblr? Sherlock asked quizzically. Mm-hmm. Amelia nodded, picking up her book again and skimming through it. They call you John Locke, she snickered to herself, immersing in her book. Sherlock mumbled something no one could understand, putting his glasses back on and firing his blowtorch as he trudged to the kitchen. Amelia, Sherlock, and John walked across the theater stage, ignoring the police officers idly walking about. So, what's this one? Amelia asked. Billy Button murders? The naval treatment? John half-guessed. Sherlock let out a cry of protest, throwing his hands up in the air. Ugh! There's a lot of press outside, guys, Lestrade remarked as he led the trio backstage. Well, they won't be interested in us, Sherlock said, shrugging. Yeah, that was before you were an internet phenomenon, Lestrade said, looking at Amelia and Sherlock joined hands. A couple of them specifically wanted photographs of you two. For God's sake, Sherlock said loudly, looking round at Amelia. She smirked as they continued to walk, chuckling when John elbowed Sherlock in the ribs. Sherlock stopped by a costume rack, grabbing a few items and handing them to John and Amelia. Amy, John, he tossed them each the hat. Cover your face and walk fast. Still, it's good for the public image, a big case like this, Lestrade said. I'm a private detective, Sherlock said as he gestured to himself, then pointed to Amelia. And she's a secret agent. The last thing we need is a public image. He picked a deerstalker and put it on, ignoring Amelia's fit of laughter. Shut up, Sherlock said. Your hat is no better. Fedoras are cool, Amelia protested, crossing her arms over her chest. Besides, she checked her image in her phone. I look amazing in it. She tilted the front of it so it covered part of her face, casting the rest into shadow. Sherlock and Amelia both turned up the collars of their coats, while John and Lestrade laughed at the two of them. Shut up, Amelia mumbled as she pushed open the door and walked out. Amelia winced, seeing white spots as cameras flashed and questions were shouted out at John, Sherlock, Amelia, and Lestrade. She looked to Lestrade and let out a loud laugh before she slid into Lestrade's car. Sherlock sat beside her, John sitting in the passenger seat. Well, that was interesting, Lestrade said as he hopped into the driver's seat and started the car. He sighed as reporters flocked the car. This is going to be a long night. Chapter 20. A Tea Party in Buckingham Palace. Sir, a police officer said to D.I. Carter, a phone call for you. The D.I. took the phone and held it to his ear. Carter, he said. Have you heard of Sherlock Holmes? Lestrade said on the other end, feet kicked up on his desk. Who? Well, you're about to meet him now, Lestrade said. This is your case. It's entirely up to you. This is just a friendly advice. Give Sherlock 5 minutes on your crime scene and listen to everything that he has to say. And as far as possible, try not to punch him. A car pulled up alongside the crime scene, its tires scraping along the gravel and sending plumes of gray, cloudy dust into the air. Carter glanced down at the phone in his hands, eyebrow furrowed and biting the inside of his lip. He waved a young sergeant over to inspect the car and its passenger. Carter rarely, if ever, received call from Lestrade's. It made Carter wonder how important the Sherlock Holmes fellow was if it forced Lestrade to call him. Sir, said the young sergeant, stepping away from the car. This gentleman says he needs to speak to you. Yes, I know, Carter nodded, walking to the car. Sherlock Holmes. John stepped out of the car. John Watson, he corrected, still miffed that Sherlock hadn't shown up. The doctor took Carter's hand and shook it. Are you set up for Wi-Fi? There were 4 large stacks of paper piled atop Amelia's desk, each taller than the last. She stared at them for a moment and let out a heavy sigh. She'd gone to lunch, and when she had returned, the papers were there with a note reading, Have fun, M.H. Even John could have figured out who sent the message. But, as Amelia did not currently have her car, Sherlock had managed to puncture the tires and shatter the windshield, and it was currently getting repaired, and her office was a good 2-hour walk from Buckingham Palace, which was where Amelia imagined Mycroft to be. He did enjoy hovering around, as though he were some sort of vulture, and the hushed words spoken within Buckingham Palace were practically Mycroft's food. Sherlock constantly made jabs about Mycroft's weight, but Amelia had never, not once, seen Mycroft consume anything besides water, brandy, or tea. Perhaps after all of Sherlock's remarks, he'd become too self-conscious. Amelia swore to herself that she would talk with Sherlock once she returned to Baker Street. Monica, said Amelia, ringing her secretary. Yes, Miss Watson, Monica answered. How may I help you? Please remind me to punch Mycroft Holmes the next time I see him. Monica stiffed a giggle. Of course, Miss Watson. Thank you. That'll be all. Amelia hung up on her secretary, holding her head in her hands tiredly. Truth be told, Amelia wasn't quite sure what Sherlock did when she was gone. She wondered if he moped around all day, like Two did when he waited for Amelia to come home. At the thought of the dog, she began to worry about him. Surely Sherlock wouldn't perform any experiments on him while Amelia was at work, although it wouldn't be unlike Sherlock to do so. She would have Sherlock's head if he had done anything to two. But now the thought was in her head, and she began to wonder, what did Sherlock do while she was gone? Sherlock wandered out from the kitchen, rubbing at his eyes with one hand as he yawned. He wore nothing but a stark white cotton sheet, wearing it as though it were a toga. Two yelped as Sherlock stepped on his foot, glowering at the detective with what looked like a disdain. Perhaps Sherlock was over-analyzing the dog's behavior. Oh, go away, Sherlock muttered. The dog shooting him one last look before jumping up on Amelia's chair and curling into a ball, falling fast asleep. Sherlock crouched down before his laptop, adjusting his webcam to his level. We realize this is a tiny bit humiliating, said John, voice crackling through the speakers. It's okay, I'm fine, Sherlock yawned out, picking up his tea from the table and taking a sip. He carried the laptop to the living room. Now show me to the stream. John clenched his jaw, already exasperated with his friend's antics. I didn't really mean for you. Look, Sherlock started. This is a 6. The doorbell rang, a noise Sherlock chose to ignore. Sherlock adjusted the camera again. There's no point in my leaving the flat for anything less than a 7. We agreed. He scrunched his eyebrows. No, go back, he commanded. Show me the glass. John angled the laptop down towards the glass. When did we agree on that? We agreed it yesterday, said Sherlock. Stop. He leaned in towards the screen, trying to examine the mud. Closer. He didn't comply, instead facing the camera. I wasn't even home yesterday, he said, sounding annoyed. I was in Dublin, with Amelia. Well, it's hardly my fault you weren't listening. Listening, Sherlock said, looking at the stairs in anger, as the doorbell rang several more times. Shut up! Do you just carry on talking when we're away? John asked. John shrugged. I don't know. How often are you away? Now show me the car that backfired. John sighed and turned the laptop to face Phil's car. It's there. That's the one that made the noise, yes? Sherlock clarified. Yeah, John affirmed, looking into the camera once again. And if you're thinking gunshot, there wasn't one. He wasn't shot. He was killed by a single blow to the back of the head from a blunt instrument, which then magically disappeared along with the killer. That's got to be an 8 at least. You've got 2 more minutes, and then I want to know more about the driver, D.I. Carter said to John. Oh, forget him, Sherlock said dismissively, waving his hand in the air. He's an idiot. Why else would he think himself a suspect? I think he's a suspect, Carter said into the camera. Sherlock pursed his lips. Pass me over. All right, John said warningly, lowering the lid ever so slightly. But there's a mute button, and I will use it. Up a bit, Sherlock protested. I'm not talking from down here. John gave up, shoving the laptop into Carter's hands. Okay, just take it. Take it. Having driven to an isolated location and successfully committed a crime without a single witness, why would he then call the police and consult a detective? Fair play. Sherlock spat at the, in his mind at least, incompetent D.I. Carter didn't take Sherlock's words into consideration. He's trying to be clever, he countered. It's overconfidence. Sherlock sighed. Did you see him? Morbidly obese, the undistinguished habitus of a single man living on his own. The right sleeve of an internet porn addict, and the breathing pattern of an untreated heart condition. Sherlock paused, only to take a breath. Low self-esteem, tiny IQ, and a limited life expectancy, and you think he's an odious criminal mastermind. His words came out sounding like an accusation rather than a question. Sherlock turned to face John's chair, where Phil was sitting. Don't worry, this is just stupid. Frantic, Phil said, What did you say? Heart what? He ignored Phil. Go to the stream, demanded Sherlock. What's in the stream? Carter asked, finally starting to believe Sherlock's theory. Sherlock leaned into his chair. Go and see. Sherlock, Mrs. Hudson chastised as she came up into the living room, followed by 2 impeccably dressed men. You weren't answering your doorbell. His room's to the back, one said, pointing towards the back of the flat. Get him some clothes. Who the hell are you? Sherlock demanded, more curious than angry. Sorry, Mr. Holmes, you're coming with us, the same man said. He reached forward and shut the lid of the laptop, ignoring John's cries of protest. Please, Mr. Holmes, where you're going, you want to be dressed. The second man set down some clothes before Sherlock. Sherlock quickly dismissed the second man, turning to eye the first man, who was clearly in charge, coming to a conclusion in a blink of an eye. Suit, 700 pounds. Breast pocket, unarmed. Thumbnails, manicured. Forehead, office worker. Hands, right-handed. Shoes, inner worker. Hairs on trouser legs, 3 small dogs. Sherlock smiled smugly and looked up at him. Oh, I know exactly where I'm going. Monica stepped into Amelia's office, clutching her clipboard so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. Amelia barely looked up. Did I have a meeting, Monica? She asked, continuing to read over the documents Mycroft had sent her. As much as Amelia did not mind Mycroft's company, the fact that their entirely separate jobs overlapped each other in their duty grated on her nerves, mainly because Mycroft would not think twice about sending Amelia any extra work he could, since whatever the hell Mycroft's official job was dealt with the country's problems. Anything related to the country's security was sent to Amelia for her advice on how to fix the problem. That being said, Amelia was rather fond of her job. No, Miss Watson, Monica said, stuttering. Amelia raised an eyebrow, looking up at last. I mean, this is the politest way possible. What exactly are you doing here, then? Just then, 4 large men, dressed in sharp, crisp suits, came storming into her office, kicking down the door. Amelia pursed her lips, seeing that each one of them carried a tranquilizer gun by their wrists. Miss Watson, one said, we've come to escort you to— Bloody hell, Amelia exclaimed, eyeing the broken door. I just replaced that after the last time you barged in here, demanding that I come with you. Whatever it is that Mycroft wants, you can tell him to sod off, because I'm still working on this mess that he gave me. She gestured to the paperwork. So off you pop, because I'm not coming with you lot again. The man looked like he was trying not to smile, and Monica had to disguise her laugh as a cough. I'm afraid, he said, that isn't an option. Amelia frowned. Well, now I'm making it one. Sorry, Miss Watson, but you're going to have to come with us. Oh, shut up with the cliches already. I'm not going with you, and that's final. The man didn't wait for her to finish speaking before he took out his tranquilizer and aimed at Amelia. She didn't hesitate, striking upwards, using her short stretcher to her advantage. The man was sent stumbling backwards, the other three rushing towards her. Amelia stood in the corner, unsure of what to do, before fleeing out of the now broken door, desperate to avoid confrontation. Amelia's gaze became tinted as she struggled to keep the man off of her. Someone's fist hit her nose, a loud cracking sound, and blood started to ooze out of her nose. With a furry-filled snarl, she shoved them off of her, deciding to lash out now and consider the consequences later. Why was Mycroft always getting involved in her life? The first man came at her again first. She grabbed his ear, slamming him against her desk. He crumpled, unconscious. She was aiming to incapacitate them, after all, not kill them. The second and the third one took their time, hovering towards the back, while the fourth one started towards her. She gave him a solid uppercut to the jaw, blood gushing out of his mouth as his teeth bit the tip of his tongue. Yet it didn't deter him. He pinned her against the wall with the aid of the second one and third one, taking out his tranquilizer gun and shooting it in her thigh. Amelia collapsed moments later. John walked into the large, ornate hall, taking slow, steady steps. The dull clack of his heels were muffled by the carpet, trodden underfoot, but in the silence, the noise was practically deafening. He tried to drown the sound out, choosing to marvel at the sight of the crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. 2 sofas had been arranged on either side of a coffee table, where a pile of clothes and a pair of shoes were placed. And there, amongst the glamour and the elegance, was Sherlock sitting in nothing but a bed-sheet. Sherlock turned to face John, looking completely calm, his hands folded, holding the sheet close. John furrowed his eyebrows, gesturing to the room as if he were saying, "What the hell, Sherlock?" He shrugged as John sat down beside him. They both turned to the entrance where John had entered, hearing loud, angry shouts, followed by curse words and the occasional frustrated scream. "Get bloody hands off of me, damn it!" Amelia yelled. "First you barge into my office, then you attack me, then you tranquilize me, and you drag me here. I'm pretty sure I can throw you in jail for each one of those things. And, for the record, I can walk by myself. Thank you very much." She stumbled into the room, blood caking her upper lip and matting her hair, and she looked furious. She narrowed her eyes at Sherlock. "What the hell did you do this time?" John gestured towards Amelia's mouth. You've got a bit of something there." Amelia shot him a glare. "Shut up." He didn't bother arguing with her. "This wasn't you?" Sherlock asked her, head cocked. "No, I don't think so," Amelia said. "I mean, yeah, it could have been, but aside from what happened earlier, I seriously doubt any of them could have landed me here. And what happened earlier was to bring me here. So we can officially rule that out." She sat down beside Sherlock, pulling out one of the handkerchiefs she'd stolen from Mycroft from her pocket, dabbing at her nose. "Are you wearing any pants?" "No." John blinked. "Okay." Amelia smiled. "Good." There was a moment of pure and utter silence before the trio burst into a fit of laughter, the noise echoing throughout the palace. "At Buckingham Palace. Fine," John said, trying to keep himself under control. "Oh, I'm seriously fighting an impulse to steal an ashtray." Both Amelia and Sherlock chuckled. "As am I," Amelia said. "What are we doing here, Sherlock?" John demanded. "Seriously, what?" "I don't know," Sherlock admitted. "Here to see the Queen?" John guessed. "Wouldn't be surprised," Sherlock said. "She's asked for Amy's help on more than one occasion." He punched him. "I told you to stop reading my damn files," Amelia said. "They're classified." John sighed. "But seriously, Sherlock, are we—" "Oh," Sherlock said as Mycroft enters the room. "Apparently, yes." Amelia burst out laughing once again, John and Sherlock joining in. "Children," Mycroft muttered, too quiet for anyone to hear. Mycroft glared at the trio, completely and utterly exasperated. "Just once, can you 3 behave like grown-ups? We solve crimes." Amelia looked to John. "He blogs about it." She turned to Sherlock. "He forgets his pants, and I'm the babysitter, so I wouldn't hold too much hope." Amelia got to her feet. "Oh, actually, I was looking for you." With one swift move, too fast for anyone to see, Amelia kicked Mycroft in the groin, the eldest Holmes doubling over in agony. She bent down to speak to him. "I was just going to punch you for sending me all that paperwork, but now my nose is broken because of your stupid men. You're lucky that John's a doctor, because I would break your nose, just so you could come with me to go visit a doctor." "Message received," Mycroft groaned. Sherlock was grinning from ear to ear, looking like a madman, as Amelia sat back down beside him. Her arms crossed over her chest. I was in the middle of a case, Mycroft, he said, turning to his brother. Grimacing, Mycroft straightened. What, the hiker and the backfire? I glanced at the police reports. Bit obvious, surely. Amelia was ecstatic that Mycroft sounded in pain. She turned to her brother, whispering, Can you fix my nose when we get back? I can't believe you hit Mycroft, he murmured. But yes. She shrugged and said he deserved it. Sherlock ignored the Watson. Transparent, he said to his elder brother. Time to move on, then, said Mycroft, handing Sherlock's clothes to him. He promptly refused them, looking away with disinterest. We are in Buckingham Palace, the very heart of the British nation. Sherlock Holmes, put your trousers on. Knowing that Sherlock was too busy pouting, Amelia asked, What for? Your client, Mycroft answered with narrow eyes. Sherlock rose to his feet. And my client is... It was then that a rather pompous and shallow-looking man started into the room. Illustrious, he said as Amelia and Sherlock's gaze snapped to him, in the extreme. While Amelia and Sherlock stubbornly remained seated, refusing to give the man any form of respect, John, however, got to his feet and gave the newcomer a curt nod, the remnants of a habit from his days in the military. And remaining, continued the man, I have to inform you, entirely anonymous. Ah, Mycroft. Harry, Mycroft greeted, shaking Harry's hand. May I just apologize for the state of my little brother and his girlfriend? First off, I'm not his girlfriend. Amelia was quick to correct. It's complicated. Secondly, she pointed to her nose. This is on you, Mycroft. I have told you dozens of times to personally ask me to come with you when you need me, rather than send a group of idiotic security officers. Also, if I need plastic surgery on this nose, I'm going to have a fit. Harry's jaws clenched in distaste and turned to Sherlock. Full-time occupation, I imagine, he remarked, looking back to Amelia. He stuck his out for her to shake. She eyed it, eyebrow raising. I don't shake hands. I'm glad to know that our national security advisor is fully competent for her job, Harry said, voice dripping with sarcasm as he lowered his hand. Listen here, you little prick, Amelia started, getting to her feet. Amelia Laura Watson, Mycroft scolded. Sit down or I shall have to detain you. She crossed her arms over her chest, sitting back down with a scowl. Trying hard not to smile at his small defeat, Harry looked over at John. And this must be Dr. John Watson, formerly of the 5th number Northumberland Fusiliers. John shook his head. Hello, yes. My employer is a tremendous fan of your blog, Harry praised. Both Amelia and Sherlock scoffed at the thought. He shot his sister and Sherlock a glare before saying, Your employer? Particularly enjoyed the one about the aluminum crutch, Harry affirmed. Giving Sherlock and Amelia a smug look, John grinned at Harry. Thank you. Harry tilted his head at Sherlock. And Mr. Holmes, the younger. You look taller in your photographs. I take the precautions of a good coat and a short friend, said Sherlock, getting to his feet. Mycroft, I don't do anonymous clients. I'm used to the mystery at one end of my cases. Both ends is too much work. He turned to Harry. Good morning. With that, Sherlock started to walk out of the room, sheet trailing behind him. At the last moment, Mycroft darted forward to step on the fabric, pulling the sheet down, and exposing Sherlock's behind for the briefest of moments. Clutching at it, Sherlock scowled, appalled that his brother would behave such a way. This is a matter of national importance, Mycroft scolded. Grow up. Sherlock refused to face his brother, grinding his teeth in order to keep his temper under control. Get, he spat, off my sheet. Or what? Jeered Mycroft. Or I'll just walk away. I'll let you, Mycroft shot, knowing that even Sherlock would be humiliated walking around Buckingham Palace stark naked. Please do, murmured Amelia, taking them all by surprise. Mycroft, John, and Harry eyed her, looking particularly concerned, partly disgusted while Sherlock grinned from ear to ear. That was when John decided to step in. Boys, please, he said to Sherlock and Mycroft. Not here. Who is my client? Sherlock snarled. Take a look at where you're standing and make a deduction, said Mycroft. You are engaged by the highest in the land. Now, for God's sake, he trailed off, Amelia snickering, as Mycroft timed to calm himself. Put your clothes on. When Sherlock had dressed and sat down between the Watsons, Mycroft poured tea from the teapot, which had magically appeared on the coffee table while Sherlock had been changing. Mycroft smiled at Harry. I'll be mother. And there is our whole childhood in a nutshell, Sherlock said darkly, calming slightly as Amelia patted the back of his hand. Harry cleared his throat. My employer has a problem. Obviously, Amelia snorted. Why else would you be here asking for our help? Your employer wanted to give us unicorns for our contribution to this country? Sherlock beamed at her response. A matter has come to light of an extreme delicate and potentially criminal nature, Mycroft said. And in this hour of need, dear brother and Miss Watson, your names have arisen. Why? Sherlock questioned. You have a police force of sorts, even a marginally secret service. Why come to us? People do come to you for help, don't they, Mr. Holmes? Not to date anyone with the Navy, Sherlock retorted. This is a matter of the highest security and therefore of trust. Interpreted Mycroft. Amelia frowned. Which makes me wonder why you would ask for Sherlock's help. He's not exactly the best with people, she muttered. You don't trust your own secret service? John asked Mycroft. Naturally not, he replied. They're all spies on people for money. Thank you. I try, Amelia interjected. Harry cleared his throat. I do think we have a timetable. I thought he said Time Lord, and I got excited. Excited, Amelia whispered into Sherlock's ear. Yes, of course, Mycroft said, opening his briefcase. He handed Sherlock a picture of a woman with dark brown hair and bright blue eyes. What do you know about this woman? Nothing whatsoever, Sherlock said. Mycroft arched his eyebrow at Amelia, prompting her to answer his question. Not my department, Amelia said, shaking her head. The elder Holmes spit back a smirk. Then you should be paying more attention, Mycroft said condescendingly. She's been the center of 2 political scandals in the last year, and recently ended the marriage of a prominent novelist by having an affair with both participants separately. You know, I don't concern myself with trivia, said Sherlock. Who is she? Irene Adler, professionally known as the Woman. John looked up. Professionally? There are many names for what she does, Mycroft said. She prefers dominatrix. Dominatrix, Sherlock mused aloud, looking off into the distance. Mycroft rolled his eyes. Don't be alarmed. It's to do with sex. Sex doesn't alarm me, Sherlock said quickly. How would you know? I would shut up now, both of you, Amelia coughed, resting her chin in her hand and looking away, the tips of her ears turning crimson. John gasped at Sherlock. You prat! The hell were you thinking? I already told you off for once for this. Yeah, but that time we weren't doing anything, Amelia said. She sighed. Anyway, John, now is not the time nor the place to be doing this. You slept with my sister, John said. You actually slept with my sister. Sherlock shrugged. There really wasn't much sleeping involved. Sherlock! John, he mocked calmly, I see no reason as to why the matter concerns you. You are a doctor. You understand the biology behind it. It is an insistent human behavior, and your sister had more part in it than I did. She did instigate the occurrence. I beg to differ, she grumbled. She flashed Harry a sickly sweet smile. I assure you, we are not always this unprofessional. Well, Sherlock is. Usually John and I are the rational ones. John coughed pointedly. Okay, fine. Sherlock's the neurotic one, I'm the violent one, and John is the rational one, Amy corrected. She turned to John with narrow eyes. Happy now? She didn't wait for his answer. Now, back to the case at hand. She provides, shall we say, recreational scolding for those who enjoy that sort of thing, and are prepared to pay for it, Mycroft continued, sounding rather uncomfortable. He handed more pictures to Amelia and Sherlock. These are all from her website. Amelia let out a deep breath as Sherlock leafed through the scandalous. Despite the horrible things Amelia was sure Miss Adler had done, she couldn't deny that Miss Adler was certainly attractive. And I assume this Adler woman has some compromising photographs, Amelia said, looking Mycroft in the eyes. You're very quick, Miss Watson. I take back what I said about your incompetency, Harry praised, nodding. Hardly a difficult deduction. Amelia dismissed him. Photographs of whom? A person of significance to my employer, Harry answered. We prefer not to say any more at this time. You can't tell us anything? Asked John as Amelia and Sherlock set all but one of the photos down on the table. The last one Amelia folded up and stuffed inside of her jacket. I can tell you it's a young person, Mycroft said as John took a sip of his tea. A young female person. John nearly spit all his tea over the table. Oh, don't be absurd, John, Amelia said, rolling her eyes. Harry's quite openly interested in only women, and you are happier with my girlfriends than you were with my boyfriends. Take Sherlock, for example. I thought you said you weren't my girlfriend, Sherlock said in a joking tone. You try to defend whatever the hell we are, and then I'll let you correct me, Amelia said, rolling her eyes. She sipped her own tea. How many photographs? A considerable number, apparently, said Mycroft. Apparently, Amelia repeated, snorting. If MI5 was this thorough whenever there was a case involving apparently, there wouldn't be any crimes in England, she frowned. Although that would mean I would be out of a job, so perhaps that is for the best. Do Miss Adler and this young female person appear on these photographs together? Questioned Sherlock. Yes, Mycroft said, they do. And I assume in a number of compromising scenarios, Amelia deduced. In imaginable range, we are assured. John, Amelia said to her brother, without looking at him, you might want to put that cup back in your saucer now. He blinked, realizing that he had not yet set down his cup, then hurriedly complied with Amelia's suggestion. Can you help us, Mr. Holmes? Asked Harry, growing increasingly amused by the trio. Sherlock quirked an eyebrow. How? Will you take the case? What case? Pay her, now and in full. As Mr. Adler remarks in her masthead, you know when you are beaten. Sherlock reached for his coat. She didn't want anything, Mycroft rushed to say as Sherlock turned his back to him. She got in touch. She informed us that the photographs existed. She indicated that she had no intention to use them to extort either money or favor. That caught Amelia's attention. Ooh, a power play, she said. A power play with the most powerful family in Britain. Now that is a dominatrix. Ooh, this is getting rather fun, isn't it, sure? Amelia, John warned. Yes, darling brother, Amelia said. Am I not allowed to be interested? John sputtered, then fell silent. Where is she? Sherlock asked, Amelia's interest sparking his own. In London, currently, Mycroft answered. She's staying. Text me the details, Sherlock cut him off. We'll be in touch by the end of the day. Harry looked wary. Rhyme. Do you really think you'll have news by then? No, I think we'll have the photographs, Amelia said, rising to her feet. One can only hope you two are as good as you seem to think, Harry said skeptically. It was then that Amelia's fraying patience with the inquiry snapped. She turned on her heel, glaring at him with an unrivaled anger. Even Sherlock, with his lack of emotional capacity, sighed at the inquiry's words, knowing that Amelia would show him up for ever doubting her. Amelia scanned Harry, making several deductions before entering the room had blinked. Trouser, dog lover. Mannerism, public school. Position of feet and muscles and legs, horse rider. Bags under his eyes and twitch of the muscle. Early riser, drinks a lot of tea to stay awake. Fabric creases on the skin, left side of the bed. Scent of cigarette on clothing, not on skin, non-smoker. Pronunciation of words father or mother, no, father, half Welsh. Language, keen reader. Stained teeth, tea drinker. We'll need some equipment, of course, Amelia said. John let out a breath, thankful that Amelia had decided not to retaliate. This calm didn't last long. Anything required, I'll have it sent to, started Mycroft. Can I have a box of matches? Amelia asked, turning towards Harry. I'm sorry? Or your cigarette lighter? Either will do, Amelia said, sounding indifferent. Recently just quit smoking, but I think after everything that has happened today, I deserve one. I don't smoke, said Harry. No, I know you don't, said Amelia, but your employer does. It explains why your clothes reek of smoke under all the horrendous cologne you wear, but you don't show any signs of being a smoker yourself. The inquiry slammed over his cigarette lighter with a little too much force into Amelia's outstretched palm. We have kept a lot of people successfully in the dark about this little fact, Miss Watson, Harry hissed. You have a powerful position, but you are not above the law. Amelia ground her teeth. I'm not the Commonwealth, she said, and if I ever get fired and find out it was you who prompted it, you will find yourself without a tongue. And that's as modest as she gets, John said apologetically, sighing. Pleasure to meet you. He trailed after his sister and Sherlock. Laters, Sherlock sang. Okay, the smoking, John demanded once they had gotten into the cab. How did you know? Amelia shook her head, tutting under her breath. The evidence was right under your nose, John, she said. As ever, you see, but do not observe. Sherlock looked... He looked confused. Observe what? She reached into the inside of her coat. The ashtray. Amelia tossed it in the air, then caught it and tucked it away. But how did you... John said incredulously. Amelia grinned. You'd be surprised how good I am at my job. Chapter 21. Dangerous Liaisons. What are you doing? John asked as Sherlock rummaged through his wardrobe in a desperate search. He threw various articles of clothing over his shoulder with a frustrated shout, leaving mounds of discarded clothes littering around the room. You know, I learnt to stop asking, Amelia said as she walked over into the living room, buttoning up a blazer. Her old outfit was stained in blood and various bodily fluids she couldn't quite identify. and she imagined, from the photos on her website, Irene Adler was not one to tolerate such unkept appearances. Now she wore a black blazer she had bought for herself a few Christmases past over a form-fitting, dark purple silk dress. She slipped on a pair of strappy black shoes with one hand, struggling to insert a pearl earring with the other. "Going into battle, John," Sherlock said, storming into the room, wearing a fluorescent yellow, high-vised jacket. "I need the right armor." Amelia eyed his outfit, looking skeptic. "No," she said, "I'm not going out with you dressed like that." "Yet a sheet is perfectly acceptable." "Acceptable," Sherlock said, exasperated. He frowned down at his outfit. "Damn it, you're right." "Told you," she sang, leaning back into her chair with a glass of red wine in hand. "At least I'm not dressed like I'm going to the opera," Sherlock shouted from the bedroom, continuing to dig through his clothes. He pulled out a plaid cape with a bronze clasp at the front and tossed it over his shoulders. "Please," Amelia said, scuffing. "If I was ever going to the opera, I would be wearing something a lot nicer. I have class." "But not modesty. Your neckline demonstrates that clearly." "Were you staring at my chest, Sherlock Holmes?" Amelia said, feigning anger. "Your mother will hear about this. You're the one trying to seduce a dominatrix. Perhaps I should give your mother a call." "No one is calling anyone's mother," John interrupted, shouting, "or I will call Mycroft and have you both locked up for the night." Sherlock stuck his head around the corner, meeting Amelia's eyes. "I'll get dressed. You call Harry to talk to John." On it, Amelia tilted an imaginary cap, ignoring John as he sputtered in protest. "So," said John, "what's the plan?" Amelia looked out the window of the cab. "We know her address." John blinked twice, surprised by Amelia's plan. If you could call it a plan, that was. "What, just ring her doorbell?" "Exactly," confirmed Sherlock. He leaned forward in his seat to speak to the cabby. "Just here, please." John flickered back to the mess in the bedroom, back in 221B. "You didn't even change your clothes." "Then it's time to add a splash of color," Sherlock said wearily, nearly jumping out of the cab. Amelia and John followed after him. The detective led them down a nearby alleyway, yanking off his scarf and tossing it to Amelia. "How many times do I have to tell you," Amelia said, voice muffled as she struggled to get the scarf off her face, "I am not your bloody coat rack." John snickered, then raised his eyebrow at Sherlock. "Are we here?" Sherlock replied with a 2 streets away, but this'll do. Amelia's eyebrows furrowed. "For what?" Sherlock turned to John, gesturing to his cheek. "Punch me in the face," he ordered. "Punch you?" John repeated, turning towards Amelia for help, hoping that she, of all people, could get Sherlock to his senses. Instead, she shrugged, leaving John as confused as ever. "Yes," said Sherlock, gesturing to his cheek again. "Punch me in the face. Didn't you hear me?" "I always hear punch me in the face when you're speaking," John said. Then, after a moment's pause, he added, "But it's usually subtext. Well, so's the homoerotic relationship you two share. But I haven't said anything about it," Amelia added in. Both Sherlock and John stopped moving momentarily to stare at her. "Oh, come on, even Miss Hudson sees it." "Oh, for God's sake," Sherlock muttered. He turned back to John. "John Watson, I slept with your youngest sister, fully knowing it was impolite to do so." John frowned, not understanding what Sherlock was doing. Sherlock leaned down to look John in the eyes. "And I regret none of it, especially when her name escaped my lips as she—" He was sent reeling backwards, stumbling over his own feet as John lunged at him. John shook his hand out, cracking his now red knuckles. "Thank you," John said, touching his cheek. That was. He was cut off once again as John leapt forward, sending both of them crashing to the ground. "John!" Amelia gasped, but didn't intervene as John jumped onto Sherlock's back, attempting to strangle him. "Okay," Sherlock said, struggling for air as he tried to get John off of him. "I think we're done now, John." "You want to remember, Sherlock," growled the angry hedgehog of a doctor. "I was a soldier. I killed people." "You were a doctor," Sherlock exclaimed. John let out a foul snarl. "I had bad days." "Kate," Irene Adler said, looking at her phone as Kate swept Irene's hair into an elegant updo. On her screen was a photo of a girl in various scenarios. One of her shouting at Sherlock Holmes angrily, another of her dabbing at her bleeding nose, and another of her, this time in a new outfit of a blazer and a rather attractive dress, getting into the cab with Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. "Who is this?" "I'm not entirely sure, Miss Adler," Kate confessed, still working on Irene's hair. "Amelia Watson, I believe her name was. Rumor has it that she's the Holmes's new pet. She's been known for having a reputation, however. Has strong ties with the government. The girl is practically untouchable." Irene smiled wickedly. "I like her. Such a shame, though. A pretty young thing like her is sure to get devoured in this cruel world. She switched to the next photo, admiring the photos of the nameless girl. Perhaps I could show her my ways. Irene got out of her chair, pushing Kate away as Irene admired herself in her full-length mirror. Do you think I'm her type? Miss Adler, I think you're everyone's type, Kate reassured. Irene pursed her lips, looking like a pouting child. What if she doesn't like me? She walked back over to her chair and sat down, arms crossed. Kate resumed her task. How could she not? She should be frightened if you want her. Convinced by Kate's word, Irene smiled. Perhaps it is us who should be frightened, Kate, Irene murmured, crimson fingernails clicking against the photo of Amelia. Something wicked this way comes. Sherlock buzzed the intercom to Irene Adler's home, shifting as he felt Amelia's angry gaze on his back. Hello, someone answered. He looked into the camera, eyes wide and full of panic. Sorry to disturb you, Sherlock said, sounding flustered and anxious. I've just been attacked, I think they took my wallet, and my phone. Please, could you help me? I can phone the police if you want, said the person on the other end, trying to stifle laughter. Thank you, said Sherlock, tearful. Could you please? Oh, would you mind if I just waited here, just until they came? Thank you so much. He held his handkerchief to his cheek, starting to sniffle as they were buzzed in. Thank you, he said to Kate, who had answered the door. Sherlock was followed by John, who was trying his hardest to keep their cover, and Amelia, who slipped into her new character with ease. Sherlock looked around the foyer. Ooh. He saw it all happen, Amelia said, gesturing over to John, purposely stumbling over her words. He's a doctor? It sounded like a question. Kate eyed Amelia, understanding why she'd caught Irene's attention. The woman standing before her certainly had something undeniably appealing about her, not her appearance. That was slightly above average. But rather the way she carried herself. She certainly had secrets, and if there was something Irene loved more than sex, it was secrets. Kate, she introduced. Amelia, she returned. She pointed over at Sherlock with a shaking finger. His fiancée. I just can't believe anyone would do that to poor Sigurd. It was Sherlock's father's name that first popped into her head. Amelia wasn't sure why. Kate was sure that the relationship between Amelia and Sherlock. Oh, she was very well that Amelia was lying to her, but she chose not to say anything. Wasn't going to please Irene, but she didn't see a ring on Amelia's finger, and Irene would always have her way, even if it meant someone got hurt. It's a cruel world full of bad people, Kate said. Have you got a first aid kit? John said, interrupting their conversation. In the kitchen, Kate informed, gesturing for Amelia and Sherlock to go into the sitting room. Please. Oh, thank you, Sherlock said, sounding far too excited as he and Amelia went to the room. John followed Kate into the kitchen. Thank you. Amelia glanced about the room, whistling at the extravagance. Damn, she whispered. Someone has money. Singer? Sherlock hissed. You had to name me after my father? Oh, I'm sorry that Oh, I'm sorry that your alias was shit, Amelia said, rolling her eyes. She collapsed onto the sofa, legs crossed daintily. Sherlock sat down beside her, draping his coat over the back of the sofa. You know, if you wanted to look like you'd just been mugged, you could have just asked me. It probably would have hurt less. I had it coming, Sherlock said, raising his handkerchief to his cut as he heard footsteps coming from down the hall. Hello, purred Irene Adler's voice. Sorry to hear that you've been hurt. I don't think Kate caught your names. Or if she did, she didn't tell me. Terribly forgetful she is. I'm so sorry. Sherlock trailed off as Irene entered the room, a smug smirk on her lips and absolutely nothing on her body. He stiffened, not entirely sure how to react to this compromising situation. Amelia, however, was unable to keep back a smile. She pushed her shoulders back and raised her head higher. While she wasn't as proficient in the field as Sherlock was, interrogation was certainly her forte, and Irene's appearance was nothing more than an intimidation tactic, one that Amelia had used before, in fact. Oh, it's always hard to remember an Alice when you've had a fright, isn't it? Irene Adler said, walking in front of the two of them, legs wide open. She smiled. She pulled the plastic cylindrical collar from Sherlock's shirt, and then bent over to unbutton Amelia's blazer. There now, we're all defrocked, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Miss Amelia Watson. Miss Adler, I presume, Amelia said smoothly, stepping in before Sherlock could get a word in. The pictures don't do you justice, she smiled. Hi. Sherlock cleared his throat, finally managed to speak. Stop it. Amelia gasped at him. I was just saying hello. For you? That's flirting, Sherlock muttered, sitting back into his seat with his arms over his chest. Irene smiled at their bickering, then turned toward Sherlock. Look at those cheekbones. I could cut myself slapping that face. Would you like me to try? Her gaze traveled back to Amelia. And look at you. I think you would be more fun. I'm sure you would be up for all sorts of things. I've got a few ideas in mind, actually. Would you like to join me? She bit down on the clerical collar. Amelia looked impressed with the woman's methods, while Sherlock stared at her in confusion. Just then, John walked into the room, carrying a bowl of water and a cloth napkin. His eyes were lowered to the bowl as he tried not to spill its contents. Right, this should do it. Then he looked up. I've missed something, haven't I? Please, sit down, Irene said, stepping away from Amelia and Sherlock. Oh, if you'd like some tea, I can call the maid. We had some at the palace, Amelia said. I know, Irene said, crossing her legs, folding her arms, to effort her the smallest bit of modesty. Clearly, Amelia and Sherlock said at the same time. I had a tea too, John piped in, at the palace, if anyone's interested. Sherlock narrowed his eyes at Irene Adler, concerned when he was unable to make any deductions. Doubting his abilities, he turned to Sherlock. Creases on shirt, 2 days old. Even shave, electric razor, not blade. Outfit, date tonight. Wrinkles in right eyebrow, hasn't phoned Harry. Pinpricks on lower lip, new toothbrush, brush is still hard. Bags under eyes, night out with Stamford. Do you know the big problem with the disguise, Mr. Holmes? Irene asked. Sherlock raised an eyebrow. However hard you try, it's always a self-portrait, Irene answered. You think I'm a vicar with a bleeding face. No, I think you're damaged delusional and believe in a higher power. In your case, it's yourself. She glanced towards Amelia. Or perhaps it's her. Either way, her disguise is just as interesting. A middle-class London girl desperate to be something more. Something she achieves by dressing up. She's very obviously to impress others. Why? Because she needs to be better than the person she was. Her past haunts her, and as much as she tries to forget all the bad things she's done, it never works. Irene smiled slightly. In conclusion, appearance are everyone's tell. As Sherlock unbuttoned the top of his shirt, Irene said to him, Oh, and somebody loves you. Why, if I had to punch that face, I'd advise your nose and teeth too. She looked to John, who managed a weak laugh. Could you put something on, please? John asked. Anything at all? He looked down at his hands. A napkin? Why? Irene questioned, sounding amused. Are you feeling exposed? I don't think John knows where to look, Amelia said, standing up and handing Sherlock's coat to Irene. No, I think he knows exactly where, Irene said. I think you do too. Amelia snorted. Don't try to be special and act as though you're the first woman to try and seduce me. You weren't the first. Irene arched her eyebrow. If I've heard correctly, you're just as guilty of that crime. She cocked her head. You certainly are a peculiar one, Amelia Watson. I have you know, Amelia said, if I wanted to look at naked women, I'd borrow John's laptop. Or go to a bar. You do borrow my laptop, John frowned. Missing the point, John, Amelia grumbled, then louder. Besides, I confiscate it. She and Sherlock had come to the same idea and started walking towards the fireplace. Well, never mind, Irene said, wrapping Sherlock's coat around her body. We've got better things to talk about. Now tell me. I need to know. She sat down on the armchair. How was it done? What? Amelia asked. Irene took her shoes off. The hiker with the bashed-in head, she answered. How was he killed? No, Irene said hurriedly. You're here for the photographs, but that's never going to happen. And since we're here just chatting away. That story's not been on the news yet, John said in shock. How'd you know about it? I know one of the policemen, Irene said, pausing. Well, I know what he likes. Oh, John said flirtatiously as he sat down beside her. And you like policemen? I like detective stories. And detectives, Irene said, looking at Amelia and Sherlock. Brainy's the new sexty. Position of the car, Sherlock muttered incoherently, both John and Amelia turning to stare at him. Sherlock started to pace. The position of the car relative to the hiker at the time of the backfire. That the death blow was to the back of the head. That's all you need to know. Okay, tell me. How was he murdered? Irene asked. He wasn't, Amelia said, much to Sherlock, John, and Irene's surprise. I read the case file, she shrugged half-heartedly, a small smile on her blood-red lips. You don't think it was a murder? Irene said in shock. I know it wasn't, Amelia said, Sherlock prompting her by giving her a look. How? Irene questioned. The same way I know that the victim was an excellent sportsman recently returned from a foreign travel, and that the photographs we're looking for are in this room, Amelia said. Okay, but how? So they are in this room, Sherlock said. Thank you. John, man the door. Let no one in. John shot him a look, leaving the bowl alongside with the napkin on the table. 2 men alone in the countryside, several yards apart, in one car, Sherlock said, continuing to pace once again. Oh, Irene said, sounding surprised and slightly disappointed. I thought you were looking for the photos now. No. Looking takes ages, Sherlock said, shaking his head. I'm just going to find them, but you're moderately clever, and you've got a moment, so let's pass the time. He turned to her. 2 men, a car, and nobody else. He squatted down, visualizing the crime scene in his mind. The crime scene was frozen in time, allowing Sherlock a better view of the area. Phil's face was contorted in anger, his hands raised as if he were about to slam down on the steering wheel. The driver's trying to fix his engine, Sherlock said, getting nowhere. He straightened and looked into the field. And the hiker taking a moment, looking at the sky. He suddenly appeared in the field, walking around the hiker, who was looking at the sky. Watching the birds, Amelia guessed, raising an eyebrow. However, she looked doubtful. Any moment now, something is going to happen, Sherlock said. What? Irene's sofa appeared in the field, her alert eyes looking at Sherlock. The hiker's going to die, said Irene. No, that's the result, Amelia said, she too visualizing the crime scene in her mind. What's going to happen? I don't understand, Irene said. Oh, Amelia said. Well, try to. Why? Because you cater to the whim of the pathetic and take your clothes off to make an impression, Amelia snapped. Stop boring me and think. It's the new sexy. It took her a second, but Irene said, the car is going to backfire. There was going to be a loud noise, Sherlock said, a small, barely contained smile upon his mouth. So what? Oh, noises are important, Amelia said. Noises can tell you everything, for instance. Then the fire alarm went off. Irene turned to the large mirror which hung over the fireplace. Sherlock followed her gaze. Thank you, he said. On hearing a smoke alarm, a mother would look towards her child. Amazing how fire exposes our priorities. He walked back over to the fireplace, running his finger along the mantel. His finger ran over a switch, the mirror sliding upward to reveal a small safe in the wall. Amelia turned to Irene as she stood. Really hope you don't have a baby in here, because I must say, your seduction tactics were starting to work. But this totally would have killed the mood. All right, Sherlock called into the hall. John, you can turn it off now. When the smoke alarm didn't stop, Sherlock said sadder, I said you can turn it off now. Give me a minute, John said, hitting the end of the magazine, which he had lit on fire to alert the alarm, on the table, looking around as 3 large men ran down the stairs. One raised his pistol, firing the smoke alarm, effectively silencing it. Thank you, John said as he raised his hands over his head, the man walking over towards him. Sherlock said, examining the safe carefully. Should always use glove with these things, you know. Heaviest oil deposits always on the first key used. That's clearly the 3, but after the sequence is almost impossible to read. I'd say from the make that it's a 6-digit code. Can't be your birthday. No disrespect, but clearly you were born in the 80s. The 8's barely used. So, I'd tell you to the code right now, but you know what? Irene said. I already have. They both turned to her and frowned. I think, Irene said in a low voice. Think. The door burst open, the man who had shot the smoke alarm, whose name was Nielsen, coming in and aiming his gun at Sherlock. Hands behind your head, he said to Amelia and Sherlock before turning to Irene. On the floor, keep it still. A second man went over to Irene, holding a gun to her head, while John was pushed into the room by another man with a gun to his head. Sorry, Ames, John apologized. Amelia smiled, raising his hand slowly. Trust me, this is the most fun I've had all day. Once Sherlock had raised his hands, Nielsen turned to Irene. Miss Adler, on the floor. One of his colleagues forced her to her knees, while another did the same with John. Do you want me on the floor too? Amelia said coyly, batting her eyelashes in a non-conventional attempt to get out of the situation. No, ma'am, I want you two to open the safe, he said briskly. American, interesting, Amelia mused out loud, hearing his accent. Why would you care? Sir, the safe, now, please, Nielsen said to Sherlock. We don't know the code, Sherlock insisted. We've been listening, Nielsen said. She said she told you. Well, if you'd been listening, you'd know she didn't, Amelia snapped angrily, starting to get annoyed. I'm assuming I missed something, Nielsen said. From your reputations, I'm assuming you didn't, Mr. Holmes and Miss Watson. For God's sake, John said, exasperated. She's the one who knows the code. Ask her. Yes, sir, Nielsen said, trying not to roll his eyes. She also knows the code that automatically calls the police and sets off the burglar alarm. I've learned not to trust this woman. Mr. Holmes and Miss Watson, don't, Irene started. Shut up, Nielsen snapped. One more word out of you. Just one, and I will just decorate that wall with the insides of your head. That, for me, will not be a hardship. Amelia glared at him in fury. Touch her, and I'll kill you myself. Mr. Archer, Nielsen said to one of his colleagues, at the count of 3, shoot Dr. Watson. What? John said in shock. Oh, now you've gone too far, Amelia growled, angry that he had threatened her brother. We don't have the code, Sherlock said slowly, gritting his teeth, as Archer pressed the pistol into the base of John's neck. 1, Nelson said. We don't know the code, Sherlock said insistently. 2, she didn't tell us. His voice grew louder. We don't know it. I'm prepared to believe you any second now, Nelson said calmly. He waited a moment, then said 3. No, stop! Sherlock suddenly exclaimed, Nelson holding up his hand to stop Archer. The detective's mind racing at a frantic pace, deliberately fueling him. Desperation fueling him. He turned to the safe, loosening his hands as he thought. He lifted his finger, then typed 32, 24, 34. 32, 24, 34. To everyone's surprise and to Irene's amusement, the safe accepted the password. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, Mr. Niels said. Open it, please. He reached to open the safe, only to see how Irene seemed ready to jump away at any moment. It didn't take Sherlock long to come up with a plan. Vixen Camos, he entreated. Then the entire room was in pandemonium. John threw himself to the floor in the same instant as Sherlock pulled open the safe. Amelia dodged to the side just as a gun went off from the inside of the safe, shooting Archer in the chest. In the chaos, the Americans were in taciturn, too in shock to retaliate as Amelia grabbed Nilsson's pistol, Irene reaching back and hitting her own guard in the groin. With one smooth motion, Amelia knocked Nielsen out, unable to keep back the content smile as he collapsed to the floor. John had avoided the fight, watching as Irene grappled for her guard's pistol. As soon as she had taken control of the weapon, Sherlock turned to her. Do you mind? Not at all, Irene said smugly, slamming the gun across her guard's face. Amelia cocked her head, frowning down on Archer's body. She bent down, then felt for his pulse. He's dead, she announced. Irene's gun was still aimed at her guard. Thank you, she said to Amelia and Sherlock. You were very observant. Observant? Observant? John repeated, confused. Irene gave Amelia a small smile. I'm flattered. Don't be, Amelia said, raising a single eyebrow. You're very self-obsessed. It's only natural that your password would be what it was. It's a bit obvious if you think about it. It'd only be obvious if you were looking, Irene said. She held back a smile. Were you looking, Miss Watson? Flattered? John pressed. Amelia eyed her warily. Would you care if I was? Sherlock grabbed Amelia by the collar of her shirt and dragged her out into the streets. Stop flirting, he ordered. John trailed after them. We should call the police. Sherlock didn't seem to hear him, letting go of Amelia and shoved him in front of her. Must you flirt with everyone we meet? She rubbed her sore neck with the heel of her hand. You have to admit, Amelia said, it does help the process along. And because of that, unlike you, I get shit done. She turned to John. And yes, we should. That was when Sherlock raised the pistol to the air and fired 5 times in quick succession. In the distance, tires screeched to a stop. People were starting to peek out of their windows to see what had happened. On their way, said Sherlock, looking smug. Now, who isn't getting things done, Amy? You're just jealous because Irene likes me, Amelia said, arms crossed over her chest. It's not my fault. It must be my stunning personality. She couldn't keep from laughing at her own sarcasm. Okay, yeah, it's not that. For God's sake, John exclaimed, hand still covering his ears. Sherlock rolled his eyes, a very Amelia-like action John had noticed. Oh, shut up, it's quick.